Our babysitter refused to let us go to the storm cellar during a tornado warning because Mom said no playdates, while every other house on our street had already evacuated. I was 10 years old when the TV vibrated. Tornado warning, take shelter immediately. I jumped up to face my babysitter. Megan, me and the twins need to get to the Johnson storm cellar. Sit down. She didn't even look up from her phone. Your mom literally warned me you'd pull something like this. No playdates. Outside, the sky had turned that sick green color, like a bruise on the world. Our golden retriever Max was already peeing on the floor. Look at the sky, that's not normal. Weather isn't an excuse for disobedience. The alert started screaming. Her phone, my tablet, the weather radio in the kitchen Dad insisted we keep. She muted them all. You're scaring your sisters with this drama. That's when I noticed it. The Johnsons' house across the street, the Martins next door, all dark, all empty. We were the only idiots still at home. Then came the hail. Not normal hail. Golf balls smashing against the windows. Crack, crack, crack. One hit so hard it left a spider web of cracks in the living room window. Sophie started crying. Real tears, not her fake ones. Sophie, go to your room. You're being disruptive. Megan's voice had that edge now. Emma, kitchen, you. She pointed at me like I was something disgusting. Stay where I can see you. We need to stay together. Mom always says during tornadoes I make the rules here. She started grabbing our devices. My tablet, both phones. Even yanked Emma's Nintendo from her hands. Everything went in her backpack. No electronics during babysitting time. The house made this sound. Not settling, not normal, like when you twist a plastic bottle right before it cracks. Everyone's evacuated, I said. Look outside. Every house is empty. Stop being dramatic. But then we heard it. That sound everyone talks about. Not really like a train. The windows started doing this thing. Like the house was trying to breathe but couldn't. Oh gosh, the car! Megan went white, but not tornado white. Worried about property white. Your parents will kill me if it gets hail damage. She yanked open the front door. Wind slammed it against the wall so hard a family photo crashed down. Sophie, come help me move the car. What? No! But she was already dragging my crying sister into the storm. Into the sideways rain and ice balls. I could hear Sophie screaming over the wind. Emma was still upstairs. Alone. The breathing sound was getting louder. I looked at the living room window with its spreading cracks. At the couch where Megan wanted us to sit. That's when something in my brain just broke, that moment when you know you're about to get in massive trouble but the alternative is dying. I ran upstairs. Emma was under her bed making these tiny whimpering sounds like a hurt puppy. We have to go. Now. Her bedroom window was bowing so far inward I thought it would pop like a bubble. Get back here. Megan stood in the doorway, soaked, makeup streaming down her face. Your parents trusted me. The living room window exploded. Not cracked. Exploded. Like a bomb went off. Glass everywhere. Rain and debris flying horizontal. I saw someone's mailbox sail past. I grabbed both twins and ran. Max followed behind. Megan tried to block the bathroom door but I shoved past her. We tumbled into the bathtub. I yanked the mattress from the twins' room on top of us just as the sound became deafening. The twins were sobbing underneath me. I held them tight, pressing my eyes shut, praying harder than I'd ever prayed in my life. We stayed under that mattress forever, or maybe 10 minutes. Time gets weird when you think you're going to die. When I finally peeked out, I could see the sky where the hallway used to be. Emma's bedroom, where she'd been hiding, was gone. Just gone. Our couch in the living room had a stop sign through it. The same living room where Megan made us sit. We found Megan in the kitchen, cut up but breathing, still clutching her backpack with our phones. The car she'd tried to save was in the neighbor's pool. When the firefighters pulled us out, she kept saying, I followed all the rules. I kept them safe. The fire chief looked at her like she'd grown a second head. Ma'am, you were the only family that didn't evacuate. The sirens went off 45 minutes ago. Megan was still insisting that we had overreacted to a simple storm, that we should have just listened to her and everything would be okay. And a few months later, I understood why. Because that's when I found out the real reason she never let us out of the house that day. Mom found the police report 3 months after the tornado when she was cleaning out the garage. Some water-damaged box from the insurance company had a folder stuck to the bottom, and inside was this paper about Megan from 2 years before we even knew her. She'd been arrested for trying to break into someone's house during another tornado warning, claiming she needed to get her stuff back from her ex-boyfriend who wasn't home. The cops found her in his living room with a crowbar and a backpack full of his electronics. She got probation and community service. But the weird part was what the ex-boyfriend told police later. He said Megan had this thing about storms, how she'd get obsessed with watching the news during bad weather, and would always want to go to specific houses when warnings went off. He thought she was just scared of storms until he caught her going through his safe during a thunderstorm, and that's when he broke up with her and changed his locks. The prosecutor's notes said Megan had done this at least 3 other times that they knew about. Always during weather emergencies when people evacuated, always targeting houses where she'd been before as a babysitter or house sitter. Mom's hands were shaking when she showed me the paper, and that's when everything about that day started making horrible sense. The way Megan had grabbed every single device wasn't about screen time rules, it was about making sure we couldn't call for help or see the evacuation orders. She'd shoved my tablet, both phones, even Emma's Nintendo into that backpack before the windows even started rattling, like she'd planned it all along. I remembered how she'd muted every alert, every siren, every warning that screamed at us to get out, and how her face had stayed calm the whole time like she was waiting for something. The neighborhood had been completely empty, every house dark, every family already in their storm cellars or driving away, but Megan had acted like she didn't notice. The Johnson storm cellar door had been wide open right across the street, their emergency light blinking, and Mrs. Johnson had even texted Mom earlier that we could use it if needed. But Megan had kept us in that house like prisoners, making up rules about staying where she could see us while everyone else in town ran for safety. When she dragged Sophie outside to supposedly save the car, Sophie told me weeks later that Megan hadn't even tried to move it at first. She'd made Sophie hold the door while she went to the mailbox and grabbed something, then spent 30 seconds looking up and down the empty street before remembering the car was supposedly why they were outside. And those keys Megan had weren't our car keys because Mom found those later in the kitchen drawer where they always were. Sophie said they looked different, smaller, and Megan had put them in her pocket after fumbling with them for a bit. The whole time Sophie was screaming about the hail hitting her, Megan kept looking at the empty houses like she was checking if anyone was watching. That's probably why she freaked out when I ran upstairs for Emma, not because I was breaking her rules, but because I was messing up her timeline. She needed us downstairs and distracted while she did whatever she'd planned to do during the evacuation. The backpack she'd clutched even while bleeding from all that glass had our devices, sure, but Mom said it was way too heavy for just that stuff when the firefighters handed it over. Some of the weight was Mom's jewelry box that had been in their bedroom, Dad's watch collection from his office, and an envelope of cash from the kitchen drawer that my parents kept for emergencies. The firefighters hadn't checked it at the scene because they were focused on getting us medical help, and Megan had claimed it was just our electronics that she'd secured for safekeeping. She'd counted on the tornado doing enough damage that nobody would notice what was missing versus what was destroyed. The fire chief had been right to look at her like she was insane when she kept insisting she'd followed all the rules and kept us safe. He told Mom later that they'd cleared every single house on our street 90 minutes before the tornado hit, and our address had been marked as empty on their evacuation list. Megan had deliberately ignored the evacuation order, kept us in danger, and used the chaos to rob us. The news helicopters that circled afterward, the neighbors emerging from storm cellars, the interviews about the miracle survival of the family that didn't evacuate, it all made sense now. Megan had kept repeating her story about following the rules because she needed everyone to think she was just a confused babysitter, not someone who'd risked 3 kids' lives to steal during an evacuation. Mom called the police that same day she found the report, and they matched Megan's pattern to 6 other weather-related thefts over 4 years. She's in prison now, but I still wake up sometimes thinking about that stop sign through the couch where she'd wanted us to sit, Emma's room that got completely destroyed, and how we almost died because someone saw a tornado warning as the perfect opportunity to rob us. 3 months went by, and I still jumped every time I heard thunder. The weather alerts on TV made my whole body go cold, and I'd have to count to 10 just to stop shaking. Dad went crazy with safety stuff after everything happened. He put weather radios in every single room, including the bathrooms, and made us practice tornado drills twice a month on Saturdays. What's making Megan so determined to keep these kids inside during such obvious danger? The way she's grabbing all their devices and muting every single warning seems really calculated, not just strict babysitting. We'd all have to run to the basement when he blew this air horn he bought, and he'd time us with a stopwatch. Mom never talked about that day, and if anyone brought it up at dinner, she'd start clearing plates even if we weren't done eating. The house looked different now after they rebuilt it. Something was just wrong about it, like when you try to draw your dog from memory and the legs come out too long. The walls were too white and the floors made different sounds when you walked on them. Sophie started having these awful nightmares where she'd wake up screaming about Megan dragging her into the storm, and Mom would have to sit with her for hours. Emma wouldn't go to sleep without checking under her bed 3 or 4 times, and she'd make me stand there watching to make sure nothing was hiding. Max got weird too, and would pace back and forth by the windows whenever the wind picked up even a little bit. The other parents in the neighborhood treated us strange after everything. They all heard Megan's version about how she kept us safe and followed Mom's instructions about no playdates and maintained control. Nobody said she was lying, but I saw the looks they gave each other when they thought I wasn't watching. Mrs. Martin would stop talking when I walked by, and the Petersons started taking a different route when they walked their dog. At dinner one night, Sophie was playing with her food, and suddenly said she remembered something weird. She said Megan had been looking at something on her phone right before she grabbed all our devices, and then shut it off really fast and started collecting everything. Emma looked up from her plate and added that Megan had closed all the blinds super fast when the first siren started, which was weird since we needed to see what was happening outside. Dad stopped eating and looked at Mom, but they didn't say anything. That night, I lay in my new bedroom that smelled like fresh paint instead of home and stared at the ceiling. I decided right then that I was going to find out what Megan was really hiding because there had to be a reason she'd risk our lives to stay in that house. The next week, Flora Knox, the school counselor, started meeting with me once a week to talk about the tornado. She had this tiny office with beanbags and a lava lamp, and she gave me this journal to write in. She never pushed me to talk, and just created this safe space where I could admit how mad I still was at Megan for choosing property over our lives. Flora had me do these exercises where I'd write down what I was feeling, and then we'd talk about it. One day during recess, a thunderstorm rolled in out of nowhere, and I completely froze. My whole body remembered that green sky and the breathing windows, and I couldn't move. Flora found me standing there in the rain and taught me this grounding thing where I had to name 5 things I could see, then 4 I could hear, then 3 I could touch. The panic slowly let go of me, and I could breathe again. She walked me back inside and gave me hot chocolate from her secret stash. A few weeks later, I ran into the Johnsons at the hardware store when Dad was buying more weather radio batteries. Mrs. Johnson looked surprised to see us and mentioned how shocked they'd been that we weren't in their storm cellar since my parents had specifically arranged for us to use it in emergencies. Mr. Johnson nodded and added that they'd left it unlocked and even put a lantern inside when they saw the warnings. Dad's face got really tight and he thanked them, but I could tell he was trying not to lose it right there in the store. When we got home, he went straight to his office and I heard him on the phone with someone using his lawyer voice. The next Saturday, I was helping Dad organize all the insurance paperwork in his office because Mom couldn't look at it without crying. There were boxes and boxes of receipts and photos of our destroyed house and lists of everything we lost. I picked up Megan's backpack that the police had returned and felt around in the pockets. That's when I found it stuck in a side zipper. The SD card from Emma's Nintendo had somehow survived inside the backpack. My hands were shaking as I put it in Dad's computer. The screenshots were all there showing the emergency alert timestamps from way earlier than Megan had claimed. The first tornado warning came through at 3:47 p.m., but Megan didn't start taking our devices until after 4:30. She'd been muting warnings for almost an entire hour while everyone else evacuated. The timeline suddenly made perfect sense. Megan had systematically silenced every warning device in our house while the entire neighborhood evacuated around us. She'd collected our electronics not for babysitting time, but to make sure we couldn't call for help or see the alerts ourselves. She wanted us trapped in that house while she did whatever she was planning to do. 3 nights later, Sophie woke up screaming again, but this time she grabbed my arm so hard it left marks. She kept saying something about the car, and when I finally got her calm enough to talk, she told me that when Megan dragged her outside, she kept mumbling about how they couldn't let them find it while fumbling with those car keys. Sophie also remembered the car had been parked weird, pulled up onto our lawn at an angle like someone had arrived in a real hurry. I wrote it all down in the notebook I'd started keeping by my bed because the details kept coming in pieces through her nightmares. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about it, so I walked over to where the Johnsons were rebuilding their storm cellar. The concrete walls were fresh and smooth, and I ran my hands along them trying not to cry about what should have been. Mrs. Johnson found me sitting there on the steps, and she didn't say anything, just sat down next to me and put her hand on my shoulder. She understood without words why I needed to see the place we should have been safe. After a while, she went inside and brought me some lemonade, and we sat there watching the clouds move across the sky, both of us thinking about that day, but not talking about it. When I got home, I opened Mom's laptop and tried searching for Megan online, but her social media accounts were either deleted or set to private. The babysitting app my parents had used didn't show her profile anymore, and when I called the agency she'd worked through, they said they had no forwarding information. It was like she'd just vanished after the tornado. I kept searching different combinations of her name and our town, but nothing came up except a few old cached pages that didn't tell me anything new. That night, I sat at my desk and wrote out all my questions in a notebook. Why did she have those car keys ready? Why did she close the blinds when the sirens started? What was in her backpack that mattered more than our lives? The not knowing was eating at me worse than the nightmares because at least with bad dreams you wake up. This was real, and I had no way to get answers. 2 weeks later, I was at the grocery store with Mom when I saw the local paper on the rack. Verity LeBlanc had written an article about storm response and liability issues with babysitters who don't follow evacuation orders. The dates and details matched our situation too closely to be coincidence. Mom saw me reading reading it and tried to take it away, but I'd already seen enough. The article talked about our neighborhood without naming us specifically, but I knew Verity was writing about what happened to us. I wondered who had talked to her because it wasn't my parents. The article mentioned that some sitters avoid evacuation due to external factors like outstanding warrants or custody issues that make them afraid of police contact. My stomach dropped as I realized this might explain why Megan was more afraid of the authorities than the tornado. It made a sick kind of sense because she'd been so weird about the police cars on our street that day. I needed to know more, so the next day I went to the library and found Marissa Knight at the reference desk. I told her I needed help finding information for a school project about public records, and she didn't even question it. She walked me through the county database on one of the computers, showing me how to search by name and date ranges for criminal and civil cases. She taught me about different types of records and how to narrow searches, and I took notes on everything she showed me. After she went back to her desk, I typed in Megan's full name and the year. There it was on the screen like a punch to the gut. Megan had a bench warrant for failure to appear on a shoplifting charge, issued 3 days before the tornado. The warrant meant any police contact would result in immediate arrest, which explained why she'd been so desperate to avoid the evacuation officers going door to door. The charge was for stealing from a department store, and she'd missed her court date, which triggered the warrant. I printed out the page with shaking hands and stuffed it in my backpack. When I got home, I dug through the papers Dad had gotten for insurance and found the emergency response logs. Cross-referencing the warrant date with the logs, I could see patrol cars had been on our street 30 minutes before the tornado hit. They'd been going door to door for mandatory evacuation, and Megan would have seen them through the window before she suddenly closed all the blinds and started grabbing our phones. The timeline made perfect sense now. She saw the cops, panicked about her warrant, and decided to hide us all inside rather than risk getting arrested. That night, I showed Dad what I'd found, and he listened quietly while I explained everything. Mom stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, clearly uncomfortable with me digging into this. Dad said it made sense, but didn't excuse anything, and that Megan had put her fear of jail over our safety. Mom kept insisting we needed to move forward, not backward, but I could tell Dad understood why I needed answers. Makes me wonder why Megan thought hiding from police was worth risking 4 kids' lives when that warrant was just for shoplifting. The timing with those patrol cars 30 minutes before the tornado is really specific. Did she actually see them or just panic about the possibility? He looked at the printouts and the timeline I'd made and shook his head. The worst part was knowing that Megan chose to risk our lives rather than face a shoplifting charge. Dad pulled out his laptop later that night and showed me the app he'd used to find Megan. The screen displayed rows of smiling faces with star ratings next to them. He clicked through the sign-up process while I watched over his shoulder. Upload an ID, add a photo, type in your rate. That was it. No background checkbox to tick. No reference section to fill out. Just a payment processor that took 15% off the top. He'd assumed the app did some kind of checking, but the terms of service made it clear they were just a matching service. The next morning, a woman in a navy suit knocked on our door. Constance Lane from CPS sat at our kitchen table with a clipboard and asked soft questions about how we were doing. She wrote notes while Emma colored next to her, and Sophie played with blocks on the floor. I started telling her about Megan keeping us inside during the tornado, but she held up her hand. Without a report filed at the time, there wasn't much to investigate now. She explained that proving neglect after everyone survived was almost impossible. Megan could say she made the best choices she could in a crisis. The system wasn't built for cases where someone refused to evacuate. It was built for bruises and broken bones and kids who didn't get fed, not for babysitters who were more scared of cops than tornadoes. 2 days later, I was taking out the trash when Catherine Klein waved me over from 2 houses down. She'd been watering her rebuilt garden when she saw me. She remembered seeing Megan on our porch right before the tornado hit, not looking at the sky or checking the wind but scanning up and down the street over and over. Then Megan had run to that car like her life depended on it. Catherine thought it was weird how Megan kept checking behind her instead of watching the storm clouds. The pieces started fitting together in my head like a puzzle I didn't want to solve. Megan hadn't been watching for the tornado. She'd been watching for police cars. That car she dragged Sophie out to move wasn't even ours. It must have belonged to whoever she was hiding from or helping. She'd risked my sister's life to move evidence. She'd kept us trapped inside to avoid any cops doing evacuation sweeps. Every choice she made that day was about staying invisible to anyone in uniform. I spent hours going through the insurance paperwork Mom had filed after the tornado. The adjuster had photographed everything for the claim, page after page of destroyed furniture and damaged walls. Then I found the inventory of personal items. There was a detailed list of what was in Megan's backpack when they found her. Our phones and tablets, her wallet with $43 cash, her car keys on a sparkly keychain, and one line that made me stop. Wrapped item, approximately 6 inches, contents unknown, plastic covering intact. The photo showed a bundle wrapped in grocery bags and duct tape. Whatever was in that backpack, Megan had held onto it through the whole tornado, through the house falling apart around us, through getting cut up and bleeding, through the firefighters pulling us out. She never let go of that bag. Combined with the warrant and the strange car, it painted a picture. This wasn't just about dodging a shoplifting charge. This was about something way bigger that Megan was desperate to hide. My phone buzzed with a text from Verity asking if I'd found anything new. I sent her photos of the insurance inventory. Within an hour, she'd forwarded me an email from someone named Opal Landry. Opal had worked with Megan at a daycare the year before the tornado. She'd seen Verity's article online and wanted to share something. Megan had been written up for leaving the building during a fire drill. All the kids were outside on the playground when Megan ran back inside. Not to save anything important, not to help anyone. She went to move her boyfriend's car from the loading zone before the fire trucks arrived. She'd left 23-year-old standing outside alone. She almost lost her job over it. The daycare director had put her on final warning. One more incident and she'd be fired and reported to the state licensing board. The pattern was getting clearer with each new piece of information. Megan had a history of putting her fear of authority over kids' safety. That write-up at the daycare probably made her paranoid about getting blamed for anything else. Her whole thing about making the rules wasn't about control. It was about being terrified of anyone who might have real authority over her. She'd rather face a tornado than a police officer. She'd rather risk our lives than risk getting caught with whatever was in that car or that backpack. Verity helped me fill out a public records request for the 911 dispatch logs from that day, specifically the hour before the tornado hit our neighborhood. The form required exact times and addresses and a $20 processing fee. The clerk at the county office said it would take 3 to 6 weeks to process. She stamped the form and gave me a receipt with a case number. I needed to know exactly what had happened on our street that had scared Megan so badly she'd chosen to keep us in a death trap instead of evacuating. 3 weeks after filing that request, a thick envelope arrived from the county office with the official seal stamped across the front. I tore it open right there on the porch and spread the papers across the kitchen table while Mom was at work. The evacuation logs were typed up in neat columns with times and addresses and officer badge numbers. Our street had been swept twice that afternoon. The first patrol came through at 2:47 p.m. with notes about checking every house and marking empty ones with orange spray paint. The second sweep happened at 3:15 p.m. when they went back for holdouts. Our address had a special note typed in red ink. 3:18 p.m., 4827 Oak Street. Residents present but refusing evacuation. Female babysitter, approximately 19 to 20 years, stated parents instructed no leaving house. 3 minor children visible inside. Supervisor notified. Return attempt scheduled 3:35 p.m. That was exactly when Megan had been grabbing our phones and tablets. The next entry made my stomach drop. 3:35 p.m., 4827 Oak Street. All curtains now closed. No response to repeated knocking. Vehicle in driveway. Silver sedan. Partial plate DRK. Mandatory evacuation notice posted on door. Move to next block due to deteriorating conditions. Something clicked in my brain like a puzzle piece snapping into place. I remembered that moment when the sirens first started wailing and Megan had jumped up from the couch so fast she knocked over Emma's juice box. She'd rushed to the window and yanked the curtains closed hard enough to tear one right off the rod. The fabric had pooled on the floor and she'd kicked it behind the TV stand. I'd thought she was scared of the storm, but now I understood she'd seen those patrol cars coming down our street. She'd seen them going door to door with their clipboards and orange paint. That night, I went through Mom's phone looking at photos from that morning before they'd left for their anniversary trip. There was one of me and the twins on the front steps with Max. Our driveway was empty except for Mom's minivan which they'd taken to the airport. No silver sedan anywhere. But then I found something else in the neighborhood Facebook group that Mom had joined after the tornado. People had been posting before and after photos for insurance claims. Mrs. Martin from next door had uploaded a whole album including one labeled storm damage, front yard, that showed our house in the background. There in our driveway sat a silver sedan I'd never seen before. The timestamp said 2:31 p.m., which meant someone had shown up after my parents left at noon, but before the evacuation started at 2:47. The photo quality was good enough to see the license plate when I zoomed in on my laptop. DRK 4429. My hands shook as I typed it into one of those free license plate lookup sites. The car was registered to Derek Raymond Knox, age 24, with an address 2 towns over. When I searched his name, the first result was a mugshot from 6 months earlier. Possession with intent to distribute, released on bail. Another arrest from the year before that. Breaking and entering. More drug charges going back 3 years. This was the same Derek that Opal had mentioned was Megan's boyfriend. The one whose car she'd moved during that fire drill while kids were left alone. Everything suddenly made perfect sense in the worst possible way. Derek had shown up at our house with who knows what in his car right when evacuation orders were starting. Megan had an active warrant that Opal had told me about. When police started going door to door for mandatory evacuation, she had 2 choices. Let them in and both get arrested with 3 kids watching, or keep us all inside and hope the storm passed over. She'd chosen to risk our lives rather than face cops. She'd literally kept us in the path of a tornado, because her drug dealer boyfriend showed up at the worst possible time with whatever was in that car. The next morning, I found Megan's old babysitting flyer in Mom's junk drawer with an email address at the bottom. My fingers typed the message before I could lose my nerve. Hi Megan, this is the kid from Oak Street. I know it's been a while since the tornado. I'm in therapy now and my therapist says I need closure about that day. Would you be willing to talk? Just to help me understand what happened. I'm not angry anymore. I just need to process it for my recovery. I hit send before I could delete it. Flora helped me prepare for if Megan actually responded. We sat in her office doing role plays where she pretended to be Megan getting defensive or angry or trying to gaslight me about that day. Something about this Derek guy showing up right before the evacuation orders feels too convenient, like pieces falling into place too neatly. The narrator's connecting all these dots. The car, the warrant, the wrapped package. But I'm curious if they're seeing patterns because they need this to make sense somehow. She taught me to keep my voice level and ask open questions that couldn't be answered with just yes or no. We practiced phrases like, help me understand, and what was that like for you? That might get her talking without making her shut down. Flora showed me how to protect myself emotionally if Megan tried to blame me or my sisters for what happened. We went through different scenarios until I felt ready for anything. 2 weeks passed with no response to my email. I'd pretty much given up when I saw her at the grocery store. She was in the cereal aisle reaching for a box of Lucky Charms, and something about seeing her buy kids cereal made her seem smaller than I remembered. She turned and saw me standing there with my cart. Her face went white and then red and then white again. We just stared at each other across all that bright fluorescent normalness. My legs moved without me telling them to. Each step felt like walking through water, but Flora's voice was in my head reminding me to breathe and stay calm. Hi Megan. My voice came out steady even though my heart was hammering. Do you have a minute to talk? She shifted her weight from foot to foot and glanced toward the exit like she might run. Her fingers tightened on the cereal box until it crumpled. Then she gave this tiny nod. I heard about your family rebuilding. I'm glad you're all okay. The words sounded practiced like she'd rehearsed them in case we ever met. I needed to know why she made those choices that day, so I asked the question that had been eating at me for months about not letting us go to the neighbor's storm cellar. Her eyes darted toward the store exit and her knuckles went white on the shopping cart handle. She started to say something about following my mom's rules, but I cut her off and said the neighbors had the cellar ready for us. Her face did this thing where it crumpled like paper, and she looked down at her shoes. She told me she'd been written up at her last babysitting job for leaving kids alone even for 2 minutes during a fire drill. The words came out fast like she'd been holding them in forever. She couldn't lose another job or have that on her record twice. My stomach twisted because that wasn't even the worst part. I asked about the warrant I'd found out about and why the police scared her so much that day. She looked around the cereal aisle like someone might be listening. Her boyfriend Derek had dropped his car at our house that morning because he had court. There was stuff in his trunk he couldn't have the cops finding. My hands started shaking when I realized she took our phones so we couldn't call 911. She nodded and looked miserable but said calling would have made everything worse with her getting arrested and Derek's stuff being found. My voice came out shaky when I told her we could have died. Her answer made my blood boil because she said we didn't die, and she followed the technical rules my mom gave her and we survived, so that's what mattered. I stared at her for a long moment and realized she would never understand what she'd done to us. There was no point arguing with someone who thought surviving by pure luck was the same as keeping kids safe. I told her no, that's not what matters, and walked away from her and her half-full cart. My legs felt like jelly walking to my car, but I made it without looking back. Once inside, I let myself cry for exactly 5 minutes. Not the scared tears from my nightmares, but angry tears about how stupid and preventable it all was. I texted Flora that I was okay, and would see her at our appointment tomorrow. The next day, Flora helped me understand what I was feeling during our session. She said I could feel angry at Megan's selfish choices and pity for her desperation, and frustrated that she learned nothing all at the same time. People are complicated, and so is how we feel about them. That night at dinner, I told my parents about running into Megan at the store. Dad apologized again for using that sketchy babysitting app to find her. Mom finally admitted she'd been too rigid with her no playdates rule. She said quietly that she never imagined someone would think that meant don't evacuate for a tornado. We sat there pushing food around our plates for a while. Later that week, Verity called about her article on emergency protocols. I told her what I'd learned from Megan without using her name. She was writing about how fear of authority can stop people from evacuating evacuating when they should. The whole conversation made me tired, but I was glad someone was trying to fix the system. 2 weeks after that, Constance Lane from CPS came by with her clipboard and tired eyes. She sat at our kitchen table drinking Mom's coffee while going through her notes about the tornado incident. She kept flipping pages and sighing, saying things about how dangerous Megan's choices were, but without formal charges filed at the time, there wasn't much to pursue. Mom's jaw got tight, but she just nodded and thanked Constance for checking in. After Constance left, I heard Mom crying in the bathroom, but when she came out, she just started making dinner like nothing happened. Life kept going, messy and unresolved like most real things do. I decided to do something about it myself, so I made flyers about emergency preparedness and stuck them in all the neighbors' mailboxes. The meeting was set for Saturday at the community center, and I made Mom help me set up folding chairs even though she thought nobody would come. About half the neighborhood showed up, which was more than I expected. The Johnsons brought cookies, and people actually talked about storm shelter plans and setting up phone trees for warnings. Some families didn't come, and I knew they were still uncomfortable thinking about how close we'd all come to disaster, but at least we'd started something. Mrs. Johnson gave me a hug afterward and said I was brave for organizing it. That night, I put together my own emergency kit with flashlights and water bottles and a weather radio that nobody could take away from me. I keep it right by my bed in a backpack I got at the thrift store. Every month I check the batteries and replace the water. This little ritual that makes me feel like I'm in control of my own safety instead of waiting for adults to make the right choices. Mom caught me doing it once and just watched from the doorway without saying anything. 3 months later, when the next storm warning came through, Max started pacing the same way he did before. The twins got real quiet and Sophie's hands started shaking. I grabbed my go bag and walked them through our plan step by step, telling them we were going to the Johnsons' cellar, and nobody got to override that decision. Emma relaxed when I said it, and Sophie stopped shaking so much. We walked across the street in the rain while Mom called Dad at work, and the Johnsons had already opened their cellar door for anyone who needed it. The storm passed without touching down, but we stayed in that cellar playing cards until the all clear sounded. I still think about Megan sometimes when storm clouds gather. I don't forgive her and probably never will, but I get it now, how fear makes people do stupid and selfish things. She was more scared of losing her job than losing us, and that's something I'll never understand, but at least I know it's true. I keep our storm cellar door clear of boxes and bikes now, and I make sure the lock works but stays open. I trust my gut over any babysitter's rules, and I've taught the twins to do the same. Sometimes the most dangerous person in an emergency is the one who's more afraid of getting in trouble than getting hurt. That's what I learned that day when the sky turned green and Megan chose her rules over our lives. Thanks for hanging out with me through all my random questions today. Hopefully my rambling didn't drive you too nuts. I'll see you in the next one. Subscribe for more content like this.